Hey y'all, welcome to episode 11 CRV 123. This is going to be the last episode in your suspension rebuild if you're doing exactly the same things I did. So, congratulations. If you've made it this far, you've done a lot of work. And if you're a newbie to DIY like I was, you probably feel a lot of accomplishment at this point, despite all the difficulties and things you run into. So let's get started on this really quickly. I am going to be showing you my new KYB struts and how I assembled them using these nice new OEM springs, OME, Old Man Emu springs. When they're assembled, they look something like this. And you can see the other thing we're going to be installing right there in this picture, and that is in the center of this picture, those nice two HRG adjustable rear upper control arms. I got those from Honda Rescue Garage. Go check out their website. They've got lots of great stuff. I don't know if they sell these as an individual package these days, but I believe that's how I got them. And then last but not least, I'm going to show you this horror show of angles that are required for these rear struts if you're going to rebuild them, because you've got to get the angles almost perfect in order for them to fit when you try and reinstall them. Otherwise, you'll have to do the job 3 or 4 times like I did. So let's get into the bluegrass. So what's the one thing I always tell you all? Take pictures, mark up your parts. As you're disassembling, do that often, right? Remember where things go. The other thing you should be doing, and I also mentioned this, and I on a lot of these videos, I include the link to the service manual. Read the service manual. The procedures on how to do these things are in there. Sometimes it requires special tools that, you get Honda tools or whatever, but, you can always work around that. But anyway, here's a nice diagram of your rear strut and the parts that go into it. So as you buy new parts to go back into your car, you might need new ones. You might need a new bump stop. You might need make sure that your new your new struts come with washers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If they don't, you can reuse the old ones. In this case, I reused a lot of my old parts, but the manual is always your best friend. And then here's that diagram again I just mentioned earlier that shows the angles. Now, here's the problem. I mentioned this in the last video. The upper mounting bolts or nuts that the strut mounts to the car on are parallel with the frame. But the main bolt that goes through the bottom of the strut is actually not parallel to the frame, and that's why you've got to orient your top hat or your upper string mount in a certain way with respect to the lower part of your strut. And that's what these angles represent here. If you don't get this right, you're going to have to redo the job. And I did. I had to redo the job like 2, 3, 4 times. And you saw how hard it was to remove these struts. Well, it's pretty hard to get them back in. So by the end of the day, I was about to swing the strut and smash the windshield. I was so frustrated. And then, of course, remember, these things are oriented to which is the inside of the top hat and which is forward. So in the last video, I told you, mark the front of your top hats. Mark everything. So anyway, you're going to need spring compressors for this job. So, go and rent them from, I don't own my own. I always rent them from not Harbor Freight, from, auto parts stores, whichever is your favorite. Go rent these things. They're pretty ubiquitous. All right, so here I've got the strut, my old strut, mounted on my workbench in a vise, and you're working with these spring compressors that are designed for McPherson struts. And I told you I've done this before in another video, I think on the front end. I like to orient those spring compressors 180 degrees opposite from each other. And be very careful with them, because that thing is a lot of energy compressed into a small space. And if it lets go, something breaks. It's like a cannon going off, and you'll you'll be hurt badly if you live if that thing goes into you. So I like to do 10 turns, on each side. Do it evenly till it's fully compressed, and then you go after that top bolt. Put the Allen key in the center so it doesn't spin, and use an adjustable wrench or a crow's foot or whatever to get the main piston bolt, the tower bolt there at the top. And then once that off, take off the washers, all that kind of stuff. And remember, again, Remember the order in which you're taking things off. And as I do this, I'm comparing it to my new strut and making sure that everything looks the same, etc. So here I am decompressing the springs, and I do it the same way I did when I compressed them. 10 turns in each direction, and then and make sure you keep it even. I do not use an impact wrench. I see that all the time on YouTube. No, I don't do that. I don't think it's safe. Your mileage may vary. Do what you do, but I would not recommend using an impact wrench. And this is a tedious, slow job, right? And there it goes. It's off, and now I take it's just easier to do it on the workbench here, so I can get better leverage. And I don't know why this particular job is taking so long, but apparently it did. I remember doing all this and just being like, by the end of the job, I think I slept for like 10 hours. It was so tiring. Maybe I'm a wimp. I don't know. So here I've got the new KYB struts in the vise, and I'm basically taking the old top hat, the cushion. I'm trying to disassemble the boot here because it's stuck on pretty good to the top hat, and that gave me a lot of trouble. There was a lot of rust on this thing. So eventually I pried it off, and here I am just inspecting everything, making sure I've got all the right parts, etc. You may have to buy a new cushion. I don't know. You won't know until you get in there and start taking things apart. And in this case, I had to reuse the top hat, so I'm basically taking a wire brush and sandpaper, and I'm really getting off all that top rust and stuff. Even though it looked really bad, the actual upper spring mount was in pretty good condition. So just get it cleaned, get it sanded, get the dust all off. And then I think at this point I was still using Paint on Rust, POR, and I no longer use that product, but at the time I thought it was great. The reason I no longer use it is because it tends to kind of peel off in big sheets of this vinyl-like stuff over time. But, again, if it's your favorite, go for it. So I've reassembled the pieces. I've got my Old Man Emu spring oriented right, up and down. Make sure you do that. And then I've got it seated well in the bottom there, where the spring is supposed to go and seat into the actual strut seat, spring seat, the lower spring seat. And now I'm redoing the compression part, right? Okay, so we just went through this. Put it on 180 degrees opposite each other. Be very careful. One of the things you'll notice in some of my videos, I'm not wearing safety glasses or gloves, and I'm barefoot. Don't do that. Don't do what I do. Here, I'm actually wearing glasses. I'm wearing gloves. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And here I go tightening it up 10 turns at a time until it gets down there. And now I'm test fitting the top hat. And I had no way to measure the angle accurately. I literally just eyeballed it at this point, and I had the strut marked toward which was the front and which was the rear. And I did my best to eyeball the angle, and that doesn't work. So this is a case where I don't recommend doing that. But here's the problem. I don't know how to accurately measure that angle. So if you've done this job before and you know how to do that, please leave it in the comments. For my viewers, I'll do a follow-up video and highlight that comment for anyone who has some good ideas on how to do this particular angle, and I'll put it in the Honda CRV 123 playlist and everything. So once I had the OEM springs are taller than the OME springs are taller than the old ones, so you're gonna have to compress them farther. And just make sure. Here I am. I'm comparing the angles and everything. Making sure I got it right. And it turns out I didn't. So I'm not going to show it. But I had to do this job, like I mentioned before, several times. And you may have to too, unless somebody puts a comment in that's just genius and tells us how it's done. So this is what you get dealing with an amateur mechanic like me. But you know what? I don't pretend to be anything but an amateur. So definitely, one thing, if you're not comfortable with this kind of stuff, I'm already torquing it here, and I'll give you the torque specs in a little while. If you're not comfortable with this stuff, please consult a professional. I'm not a pro. I don't do this for a living. I didn't go to any classes. Literally, my education was YouTube videos. So I'm not hiding that fact, and I've never hidden that fact. So you get what you pay for in this case, and you're getting this for free. So, but it is actually a very rewarding and fun job, especially if your CRV has old springs that have compressed. So I'm giving you your torque specs now, but before I do that, I have to mention, in re-reviewing the video, I did buy new top hats. So even though I think what happened was, look, it's been years since I actually made these videos, but in retrospect, I think what happened was I started to to look at the possibility of reusing those top hats. Just didn't want to deal with the rust and bought new ones. So I apologize. But if you do want to reuse your top hats, that's what you got to do. Get all the rust off, paint them, make them resistant to rust as best you can. Anyway, here are the torque specs. I'm giving you them now because I think it's easier to torque that main piston bolt, the top bolt on your strut, because once you get it into your car, remember you had to open that panel in the back and it's a pretty tight space. Not sure you can get a torque wrench in there. So I went ahead and torqued it now, but your mileage may vary. Do what you want. I'll show these specs again at the end of the video, but the torque for the upper the torque spec for the top strut tower bolt, 22 foot-pounds. I don't know, I can't talk today for some reason. All right, step by step, here we go. First step, put that mother blanker back into your car. Remember how you took it out? That's the same way you're going to put it back in. It's the only orientation that's going to work, at least on the driver's side. I think it's much easier on the passenger side. After that, we're going to do all of these things. Basically, we're doing the reverse of the job we did to take it out. And then basically, once you've done all that, you can put your wheel back on. Here we go. I've got the rear strut. This is the driver's side. I'm putting it in exactly the same way I took it out. I don't know, but for some reason, this was actually much easier than taking it out. Very, very bizarre. I think it's because I was definitely letting the suspension hang as far as it could, etc. But you can see I am having trouble with some of the lines. Please don't break your lines, and make sure you're putting in the proper orientation. Your ABS line on one side, brake on the other. If you can't remember, I hope you took pictures, but get it right. Then once we get that into the bolt holes, we're going to go ahead and deal with the upper control arm and put a bolt in. But before we actually do that, we want to take our new adjustable control arm. Apparently we want to jack up. Yeah, we do want to jack up the wheel because that'll make it easier to get the bolts in, etc. And keep that strut kind of pushed up into the holes where it goes. It was actually hard. The hard part wasn't getting it through the lines. It was getting those two studs into the proper place. So anyway. You do want to put a little bit of grease where the metal contacts the place we're going to bolt in the strut. But here I'm comparing the control arms, and I'm adjusting my new control arm to be the same length as my old one. Now I lifted this, so you're going to have to take it to get an alignment afterward. This just gets it close enough where it's not an absolute crazy camber in this case, because this is how you adjust camber. And now I'm putting on the new, this is where the ABS line is going to attach. So I'm bolting on the new bracket to the adjustable control arm. Everything looks good. Here I go. I'm basically test fitting it, putting a little grease on the bolt, not on the threads, just on the bolt where it goes through. And then I'm putting a little grease on the metal contacts around the edges of the upper control arm to keep it from squeaking, is why I do that. And it was successful. So here I am. I push the bolt through. I'm basically getting it nice and snug. I don't think I'm torquing it at this point because I still need it to move and freely and everything, but get it nice and snug. And there I am basically making sure everything's oriented properly. And here I'm basically tightening the jam nut. You want to, once you got it approximately in the place you want it to be and you've got it mounted on your car, it's easy to do this. Just lock up that jam nut. Don't over tighten it because the alignment people are going to need to loosen it to get everything right. And then go from there. So here we are. Next step is to put the lower strut bolt in, and we're gonna go through that really quickly. And so at this point, you take the bolt. You want to put grease on not on the threads again, but just on the part that's going to be inside the actual hole in the strut there at the lower part. So I've slipped that in, and this is another case where I don't think I'm torquing it yet. I'm basically just going to get it snugged up. And and so it can still move freely as I jack the suspension up and down and work with other parts. You will want to torque these things before you put the wheels on, because getting a torque wrench in there when the wheels are on is difficult. So here's the next step. We're going to put the upper control arm bolt into the control arm where it connects to the steering knuckle. And this is not a good angle. Hopefully it'll get better as I jack it up or something. We'll see. Anyway. Here I am just jacking up the suspension, taking a little bit of pressure off of things once I start to try and get that control arm oriented around the bushing. There, that's a better angle. Again, see how there's grease on the edge of the metal bushing parts there? And put grease on your bolt, slip it through, tighten everything down. You're really close to being done now, thank goodness. Once I was here, I could see the light, and I just wanted to get the job done. You know, I worked straight through on this car, had to get it on the road by a certain date so I could use it for work. And it was a lot of stress, a lot of sweat, and sometimes a lot of anger. I'm not going to lie. But you know, just get this thing tight. I'm not torquing it yet again. I'm basically just snugging it up really tight. The bolt was still kind of rusty, even though I cleaned it off. So I had a tough time getting some of these bolts back in. Hopefully yours isn't as bad as mine. Oh, I am torquing it there. Okay. So I'm torquing the bolt now to the proper spec. Let's see if I torque the other things. So it looks like I'm going to tighten up the other control arm bolt there. And I'm really tightening up the strut bolt. And I'm doing this because I've basically got things jacked up and the suspension jacked up. So next thing I'm going to do is all these things in yellow, the lines. I'm going to reattach all the lines. So I guess I didn't show it, but I would also torque the rest of your bolts, the lower strut bolt, the other bolt for the control arm, the upper control arm, and do your best to torque those nuts that the tower mounts to on the frame inside the back of your car. Go ahead and do all that. I'll give the torque specs in a second. But this is just bracket time. Putting the brackets on, you're just going to snug these things up as best you can. And again, please be careful with your emergency brake line, your actual brake line, etc. Make sure you get those right. And I think what I just showed you was actually the passenger side. But anyway, here I am just working on the top bolts here, or the top nuts. And I don't know if I tried to get a torque wrench in there or not. I probably did. Definitely try to get those upper nuts torqued to spec. And you might be able to torque your tower bolt, the center tower bolt at this point. But given the way the frame bends over there, I'm not sure that you can. But these are important. You definitely want to get these to the proper specs if you can. And one of the problems I had, I'll be honest, is I didn't have the like the proper kind of socket set up where you can get these things that are essentially wobbly and allow you to get weird angles. And I didn't have that. But anyway, I did just torque them. That was a torque wrench just there. So anyway, that is it. Here are your torque specs. The upper strut bolts or whatever. I'm trying to read these and I don't have my glasses on. The control arm to strut bolt, 69 foot-pounds. The lower control arm bolt, 69 foot-pounds. The upper strut to frame bolts, 54 foot-pounds. Snug those lines. Make sure all your lines are on correctly. I know I keep repeating myself. Top tower bolt, you probably already did it, 22 foot-pounds. And then put your tires back on and torque those to 80 foot-pounds. And here we are getting ready to put that tire back on. I must have switched at some point from the driver's side to the passenger side. Boy, was this a good feeling, being able to put those on and lower the car again. Now, one thing I didn't show you in all these videos is, earlier on I showed you how to jack it up and put it on jack stands. Definitely use the right jack points, etc. There's a diagram in my earlier video, probably one of my first ones, that shows where the jack points are. Be very careful with this, and always, always, always use jack stands. If you don't know how to do that, plenty of videos on YouTube. Go check it out. Here I am torquing the bolts, and it's done. Dock out. Oh, wait, no, not dock out. I forgot to mention one thing. At the bottom of this thing, it says bed your brakes. Why does it say that? Well, because earlier I replaced my brake calipers. I let air into the system and everything. So not only bed your brakes, but bleed them first. There are plenty of videos on YouTube how to bleed them. You want to start at the brake caliper that's farthest from your main cylinder, your master cylinder, which means passenger side rear, then go to driver's side rear, then go to passenger front, then go to driver front. Bleed them, get all the air out of your system. You don't want squishy brakes. It's really dangerous. Get yourself the proper brake fluid. Most of them are .3 these days, I think. But definitely get the proper brake fluid. And if you did put new shoes on, like I did in the front, you got to bed your brakes. You've got to. And the process for bedding your brakes it's really easy. It just involves going out and driving. So again, look on YouTube. There are a bunch of different opinions on how exactly to do it. But look on YouTube. There will be some great videos out there. Eventually I'll do my own one, but at this point, you know what? I didn't do it. I didn't know that you were supposed to bed your brakes. And so I had to put in all new brake rotors a year or two later. And I don't recommend going through that. It's a hassle. It's a pain. So just do yourself a favor. Bed your brakes. Oh, and congratulations. This is, again, I said at the beginning of the video, this was a really tough job for me. If you're doing it, it may be a really tough job for you. Allow yourself mistakes. Allow yourself days off. Eventually you'll get it done, and then it feels so good to drive this when you've just rebuilt an entire suspension. I did a partial rebuild in the back, but you know what I mean. All right, hope you have a good day. Now, dock out. Oh, you made it to the end. That's awesome. Listen, I'm Doc. I'm the one who's, the voice behind these videos. And I really appreciate you taking the time to actually watch the whole thing. That's fantastic. If you've got time, if you want to, if you like the video, hit like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the bell button so you get notified of new videos when I put them up. I'm going to try and do one a week. And I'm going to do a bunch of Instagram stuff, so make sure you follow me there and on Twitter. Instagram's going to be the shorter stuff. I don't have any merchandise yet. I'm planning to as the channel grows. If I succeed, I'll get some merch. For now, if you really want to help me in another way, you like these videos enough, I'm going to put links to my books in the description of the video. I'm a science fiction author in my spare time as well, so I'm juggling a lot of balls. But anyway, I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you at the next one. Hey, do me a favor and turn this junk off. I don't know how to deal with tech.